Morning, guys. Here we are, Science Bellwork, week 16, day 1. Make sure you create a new note for your Science Bellwork this week. Just go ahead and label that note Science Bellwork, week 16. I will be collecting at the end of the week, so make sure you keep your Bellwork in order for this week. Our theme for the week is why are the North and South Poles so cold? Today we kind of read about and discuss how different locations receive different amounts of sunlight and how that affects the temperature and also the amount of sunlight they receive and the temperature in relation to how close they are to the North and South Poles. Have a couple paragraphs to read through. Follow along as I read through the passage, and then we'll move on to respond to the questions dealing with that data table at the bottom of the page. Earth's climate varies greatly from region to region and season to season. One reason for this is patterns of daylight. Over the course of a year, every place on Earth receives the same amount of daylight, but how and when the light is received differs by location and time of year. At the poles, the sun rises and sets only once each year. 6 months of continuous daylight are followed by 6 months of darkness. Because it is dark for such a long time, the poles get very cold, and because they are frozen, it is difficult to heat them up once the sun does shine. The situation is much different at the equator. There, the daily amount of light does not change much. Within each 24-hour period, there are roughly 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness. As a result, the temperature at the equator is nearly constant and warm throughout the year. With the same amount of light and darkness every day, the areas near the equator do not have a chance to get cold like the poles do. So we have that diagram right there where it talks about near the equator, equal day, equal night, and then we go either north or south, and it differs in the amount of sunlight they receive. It says this chart shows the amount of daylight that 4 cities get in January and July. Use the information to list the cities in order of their distance from the North Pole. So we're going to look at hours of daylight. Obviously, the less amount of daylight they receive, they're going to be closer to the poles, whether that's the North or the South Pole. And then as we get closer to the equator, it's going to be more equal day, equal night. Okay, so our first location, I'm talking about closest to North Pole, I would say would be Barrow, Alaska. Because if you look in January, they receive 0 hours of daylight, but then in July they receive 24 hours of daylight. You go back to the first paragraph, it talks about how close to the poles. There are certain times of the year where they pretty much receive no daylight, and there's certain times of the year where it's 24 hours daylight. So that first location closest to the North Pole would be Barrow, Alaska. And then I think the second location would be St. Petersburg, Russia, because if you look again, amount of daylight they receive in January compared to July, 6 hours daylight in January, whereas in July they receive mostly daylight, 18 hours. So again, that aligns with what we've read in the first paragraph. So I believe that is St. Petersburg. Then I think we go to Shanghai, China, because it's, from the North Pole to the equator. We're getting closer to more of an equal amount of daylight, 10 hours daylight in January, 14 hours daylight in July. And then as we get to the equator, but go to Colombia, as you see, equal daylight for both January, July. There you have it. There's your science Bellwork, week 16, day 1. Hope you followed along and made corrections if you need to. And have a good day, guys.